A routine walk home from the library shattered into a nightmare when police profiled me and threw me in a cell. They thought they had an easy target, but they had no idea the single phone call I was about to make would dismantle their entire world. The evening air was cool, a welcome relief after a long day hunched over constitutional law, textbooks in the university library. The scent of jasmine from a neighbor's hedge hung sweetly in the air, and the streetlights cast long, dancing shadows on the sidewalk. It was my usual walk home, a 15-minute journey through a neighborhood my family had lived in for over a decade, a neighborhood that was supposed to be safe. I was mentally outlining my closing argument for a mock trial, my backpack heavy on my shoulders, when the world dissolved into blinding flashes of red and blue. A police cruiser had screeched to a halt beside me, cutting me off on the sidewalk. 2 officers got out, their movements sharp and aggressive. The older one, a burly man with a face like a clenched fist and a name tag that read Miller, swaggered towards me. His younger partner, Davis, hung back slightly, looking nervous but trying to mirror his partner's intimidating posture. "Evening, ma'am," Miller grunted, his eyes scanning me from head to toe, lingering in a way that made my skin crawl. "Bit late for a walk, isn't it?" I clutched the strap of my backpack, my heart starting to pound a nervous rhythm against my ribs. "I'm just walking home from the university library, officer. I live 2 blocks from here." I kept my voice steady, respectful. My father had drilled into me and my brother the procedures for encounters like this since we were children. Be polite, state your purpose, don't make sudden movements. "University, huh?" Miller shared a smirk with Davis. "We got a call about a suspicious individual casing houses in this area. Matches your description." I blinked. I was wearing a Georgetown law hoodie and yoga pants. I was carrying a backpack overflowing with books. "My description?" I asked, a sliver of indignation cutting through my fear. "A black woman walking home." That was my mistake. The politeness had a crack in it, and Miller pounced, his face darkened. "You got a smart mouth on you? Let me see some ID." "I'm not required to show you my ID unless you have reasonable suspicion that I've committed a crime, officer," I said, the words from my textbooks feeling hollow and useless in the face of his hostility. "Simply walking home does not constitute reasonable suspicion." "Oh, a little lawyer, are we?" Miller took a step closer, invading my personal space. His breath smelled of stale coffee and cigarettes. "I think being a smartass to a police officer is all the suspicion I need. Now give me your ID, or I'm taking you in for obstruction." My hand trembled as I reached for my phone in my pocket. Not for my ID, but to start recording. It was another one of my father's rules. Document everything. "Officer, I am now recording this interaction," I stated, my voice shakier than I wanted. I never even got the phone angled correctly. In a flash, Miller's hand shot out and slapped the phone from my grasp. It clattered onto the pavement, the screen spiderwebbing with cracks. "You're not recording anything," he roared. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep like a vice. "You're under arrest for resisting." "Resisting what?" I cried out, a surge of panic and injustice flooding through me. "You have no reason to arrest me." I instinctively tried to pull my arm away from his painful grip, a purely reflexive action. That was all the excuse he needed. "She's resisting," he yelled to his partner. In the next moment, I was being slammed face first against the hood of the cruiser. The cold metal shocked my skin, and the impact sent a blinding jolt of pain through my jaw. I felt a knee dig viciously into my back, forcing the air from my lungs in a desperate gasp. Davis was there now, wrenching my other arm behind me. A sharp, metallic click, click, click echoed in the quiet street as the handcuffs bit into my wrists, cinched so tight I felt the circulation being cut off. "Please, they're too tight," I whimpered, tears of pain and humiliation streaming down my face, mixing with the grit on the police car's hood. "Should have thought about that before you decided to play tough," Miller snarled in my ear. He yanked me upright and shoved me toward the back of the car. My feet stumbled and I nearly fell. They pushed me into the back seat, the hard plastic unforgiving against my bruised cheek. The ride to the station was a blur of flashing lights and suffocating silence. They didn't speak to me. They just radiated a smug satisfaction. At the station, I was paraded through the fluorescent-lit corridors like a trophy. I was fingerprinted, photographed, my Georgetown hoodie feeling like a costume from another life. Miller stood by the whole time, a triumphant smirk plastered on his face as he wrote his report, no doubt filling it with lies about my aggressive behavior and refusal to comply. After what felt like an eternity, I was led to a small, gray, holding cell. The heavy metal door clanged shut, the sound of finality echoing in the small space. About an hour later, Officer Miller appeared at the bars. He wasn't smiling anymore, he just looked bored, like I was paperwork he wanted to finish. "All right, law student," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You get your one phone call. Make it count. Better call Mommy and Daddy to come bail you out." He unlocked the cell and led me to a metal desk with a phone bolted to it. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching me with an air of absolute power. My hands were still cuffed in front of me, my wrists raw and throbbing. I picked up the heavy receiver, my fingers numb and clumsy. My mind was racing. My mom would panic. My brother would get angry and do something stupid. There was only one person to call, the one person who had told me, in a very serious tone just last year, "Maya, if you are ever in trouble, if you ever feel that the system is failing you, you call this number. Day or night. No matter what." I took a deep, shuddering breath and began to punch in the 10 digits of his private, direct line. Miller chuckled softly behind me. "Who you calling? The president?" I didn't answer. I just pressed the last digit and lifted the receiver to my ear, listening to the ring. Miller sighed, bored. He had no idea what was coming. He saw a scared girl in a college hoodie calling for help. He had no idea he just handed me the fuse to a bomb that was about to obliterate his entire world. The phone rang twice before a familiar calm voice answered. Hayes. No greeting, just his name. It was the voice that had soothed my childhood nightmares and lectured me on the importance of integrity. "Dad," I whispered, the word catching in my throat, thick with unshed tears. "It's Maya." There was no panic in his voice, only a sudden, sharp focus. "Maya, what's wrong? Where are you?" I'm at the 17th precinct. I've been arrested." I took a shaky breath, trying to remember the facts. Just the facts, the way he'd taught me. The arresting officers are Miller and Davis. They stopped me while I was walking home. They said I matched the description of a suspect. They assaulted me, Dad. They slammed me against their car. Behind me, Miller scoffed audibly, a low, derisive sound. I ignored him, focusing on my father's voice in my ear. "Are you injured, Maya?" His tone was dangerously quiet, like the calm before a hurricane. "My face is bruised, my wrists. They put the cuffs on too tight. I think they're bleeding." A heavy silence stretched across the line for a beat. I knew what that silence meant. It was the sound of my father processing, cataloging, and shifting from concerned parent into the man the entire world knew him as. "Okay, Maya, listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice now devoid of all emotion except for a chilling, absolute authority. "You will not say another word to any officer in that building. Do you understand? Do not answer any questions. Do not sign any paperwork. Nothing. I am handling this. Help is on the way. Just sit tight and stay quiet." "Okay, Dad," I whispered. "I love you, Maya. This will be over soon." He hung up. The entire call had lasted less than 90 seconds. I placed the receiver back on its cradle, the finality of it echoing in the sterile room. Miller pushed himself off the wall. "Daddy's going to come down and sort it all out, is he?" he sneered, his confidence fully restored. "Good luck with that." He grabbed my arm, his grip still painfully tight, and led me back to the holding cell, shoving me inside without another word. The door slammed shut again, and I was alone with the throbbing in my head and the fire in my wrists. I sat on the cold, hard bench, replaying my father's words. "I am handling this." I clung to that promise like a lifeline. For about 10 minutes, nothing happened. The normal sounds of the precinct phones ringing, muted chatter, footsteps continued outside my cell. Then the atmosphere began to shift. The ambient noise quieted. I heard hurried, hushed whispers. A phone at the main desk rang and was answered with a panicked, "Yes, sir, right away, sir." Footsteps, heavy and fast, pounded down the hallway towards the holding area. It wasn't Miller or Davis. The precinct captain, a man I'd seen on the local news named Henderson, skidded to a halt in front of my cell. He was a portly man who was usually composed, but right now his face was pale, his tie was askew, and a film of sweat glistened on his forehead. He looked like he'd just run a marathon. He stared at me through the bars, his eyes wide with a terror so profound it was almost comical. He fumbled with a set of keys, his hands shaking so violently it took him 3 tries to get the lock open. He swung the door open. "Ma'am? Miss Hayes, please come with me." His voice was trembling. Behind him, Miller and Davis came jogging up, looking confused. "Captain? What's going on? She's a suspect in—" Miller started. Henderson whirled on him, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage and fear. "You," he hissed, his voice a strained whisper. "Both of you. My office. Now." He pointed a shaking finger down the hall. Miller looked completely bewildered. "But Captain, the report—" "I don't give a damn about your report, you idiot," Henderson finally roared, his composure shattering completely. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? Do you have any inkling of the storm you have brought down on this entire department?" "We arrested a suspect who was resisting," Davis said weakly, looking to Miller for support. Henderson let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He looked from them to me, then back again, his eyes locked on Miller. "You didn't just arrest a suspect, you moron. Tell me your report says you arrested a Jane Doe." "No, sir," Miller said, puffing out his chest, still trying to grasp the situation. "We got her ID. She's Maya Hayes, a student at Georgetown." Captain Henderson looked like he was going to be physically sick. He took a staggering step back, placing a hand against the wall to steady himself. He stared at his 2 officers as if they were dead men walking. "Maya Hayes," he repeated, the name tasting like poison in his mouth. "You put your hands on a young woman named Maya Hayes, and neither of you, in your infinite career-ending stupidity, thought to ask who her father was." Miller just stared blankly. "Her father? Who cares who her father is? He's probably some ambulance-chasing lawyer." "Eh." The captain closed his eyes, a single, defeated sigh escaping his lips. When he opened them again, they were filled with a cold, terrifying certainty. "Her father," he said slowly, enunciating every syllable as if explaining a complex concept to a child, "is Christopher Hayes, and your phone call, Officer Miller, was not to some local lawyer. It was to the personal cell phone of the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The name hung in the air like the smell of ozone after a lightning strike. Miller's face, which had been a mask of smug authority moments before, seemed to collapse. The color drained from it, leaving a pasty, grayish pallor. His jaw went slack. Davis, his younger partner, just looked back and forth between the captain and Miller, his eyes wide with dawning horror, as if he was only now understanding the true scale of the earthquake shaking the ground beneath his feet. "The director of the FBI," Miller stammered, the words barely a whisper. The bravado, the arrogance, all of it had evaporated, replaced by the raw, primal fear of a man who has just realized he stepped on a landmine. Captain Henderson didn't have time for their shock. He turned back to me, his entire demeanor transformed. The dismissive authority was gone, replaced by a frantic, almost pathetic obsequiousness. "Ms. Hayes, please. This way. We have a medical team on standby for you. This is all a terrible, terrible misunderstanding." He led me out of the holding area, his hand hovering near my back, but not daring to touch me. Miller and Davis were left standing there, frozen in the hallway like statues, memorializing the exact moment their careers died. As we walked towards the captain's office, the entire precinct seemed to be in motion around us. Phones were ringing off the hook. Officers were scurrying back and forth, their faces grim. The atmosphere was thick with panic. I wasn't a suspect anymore. I was a crisis. The captain's office was a chaotic mess of files and half-empty coffee cups. He immediately offered me a plush chair. "Can I get you some water? Coffee? Anything at all?" Before I could answer, the door swung open and 2 paramedics rushed in. They were professional and efficient, their faces carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in their shoulders. They gently examined my bruised face, and then turned their attention to my wrists. As one of them carefully unlocked the handcuffs, a sharp hiss of pain escaped my lips. The skin underneath was raw, red, and bleeding where the metal had dug into me. The paramedic muttered something under his breath about excessive force and began gently cleaning and bandaging the wounds. Captain Henderson watched the entire process, wincing with every dab of antiseptic as if he were the one being treated. As soon as they were finished, another man entered the office. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit that screamed Federal Agent. He didn't look at Henderson or anyone else. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, found mine immediately. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice calm and professional. "I'm Special Agent Connolly, from the Washington field office. Your father sent me. I'm here to escort you home." He paused, his gaze flicking to the fresh bandages on my wrists. A muscle in his jaw tightened. "And to begin the preliminary investigation." Henderson visibly flinched at the word investigation. "Agent Connolly," he began, his voice strained, "this precinct will cooperate fully. It was an unfortunate case of—" "Captain," Agent Connolly cut him off, his tone polite, but with an edge of steel that left no room for argument. "My only concern right now is Miss Hayes's well-being. Everything else will be handled through the proper channels. Starting now." He looked at me. "Are you ready to go, ma'am?" I nodded, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I stood up, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt a flicker of my own power return. I looked directly at Captain Henderson, whose face was a mask of desperate apology. "My phone," I said, my voice steady. Officer Miller smashed it on the sidewalk. "We'll get you a new one immediately, Ms. Hayes. The latest model," Henderson blurted out. "That won't be necessary, Captain," Agent Connolly interjected smoothly. "We will be recovering her phone as evidence. Just have it located." He then gently guided me out of the office and through the precinct. The sea of officers parted for us, their eyes averted. No one dared to meet my gaze. The silence was deafening. When we stepped outside into the pre-dawn air, the scene was surreal. The street in front of the precinct was blocked off. At least 3 black sedans with government plates were parked at the curb, their engines humming quietly. Several more agents in dark suits stood watch, their presence a silent, overwhelming show of force. The message was clear. The full weight of the federal government had just descended upon the 17th precinct. Agent Connolly opened the rear door of the lead car for me. As I slid into the plush leather seat, I saw them. Miller and Davis were being escorted out of a side door by 2 other agents. They weren't in handcuffs, not yet, but their badges and service weapons were being confiscated. Miller's face was ashen. He looked utterly broken, a man watching his life burn down in front of him. For a fleeting second our eyes met across the parking lot. In his gaze I saw not remorse but a flicker of pure, unadulterated hatred. It was the impotent rage of a bully who had finally picked a fight with someone who could, and would, fight back. The ride home was quiet. Agent Connolly didn't press me for details, simply assuring me that my father was waiting and that everything was being taken care of. When we pulled up to my family's house, the front door opened before the car had even come to a complete stop. My father stood there, silhouetted in the warm light of the foyer. He wasn't in his usual suit. He was wearing jeans and a simple black polo shirt. But he had never looked more imposing. His face was a thundercloud of controlled fury. He rushed to the car as Agent Connolly opened my door, and his arms wrapped around me in a fierce, protective embrace. "I'm okay, Dad," I whispered into his shoulder, finally letting the tears I'd been holding back fall freely. He held me for a long moment, then pulled back, his hands on my shoulders. His eyes scanned my bruised cheek, then the bandages on my wrists. The calm I had heard on the phone was gone. In its place was a cold, glacial rage that was more terrifying than any shouting could ever be. He looked over my head at Agent Connolly, who was standing respectfully a few feet away. "Connolly," my father said, his voice low and lethally calm. "Are they in custody?" "Their weapons and badges have been confiscated, sir," Connolly replied. "They're in separate interrogation rooms at the field office. The U.S. Attorney is en route to oversee the formal charges." My father nodded slowly, his gaze still locked on the agent, but his next words weren't for him. They were a vow, spoken into the quiet morning air. This isn't just about two officers. This is about a sickness, and I'm going to cut it out, by the roots. He led me inside, my mother rushing to meet us, her face a mess of tears and relief. But as my father closed the front door, he paused and looked back out at the waiting cars and the dark street beyond. A chilling expression crossed his face, one I had never seen before. It was the look of a man who held unimaginable power and was about to unleash every ounce of it. "Connolly," he called out, his voice carrying with unnerving clarity, "get a warrant for the 17th Precinct's entire server. I want every email, every text, every file from the last 5 years. And I want the personal financials for Miller, Davis, and Captain Henderson. Tell the U.S. Attorney I'm not just charging them with assault. I'm opening a full-scale racketeering investigation. We're not just taking their badges. We're taking everything." The days that followed were a whirlwind. Our home became a command center. My father, a man I'd always seen as a distant but loving figure, defined by his immense responsibility, was now a force of nature operating on my behalf. Lawyers, federal agents, and Justice Department officials came and went in a quiet, efficient procession. My assault wasn't just a personal injustice anymore. It had become the tip of a spear my father was now wielding with surgical precision. I gave my official statement to a calm, respectful female agent from the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility. I recounted every detail, from Miller's sneer to the sickening scrape of my cheek against the cruiser's hood. My smashed phone was recovered, and its final frantic recording, though brief, was enough to corroborate my story and expose Miller's initial lie about me recording him. The body cam footage, which Miller and Davis had conveniently forgotten to activate until after I was already in cuffs, was pulled. But the audio had activated earlier. It captured Miller's escalating aggression, my calm and legally correct responses, and his roar of "she's resisting," when I had done nothing of the sort. It was damning. But my father, true to his word, didn't stop there. The initial warrants he'd ordered had cracked open a hornet's nest at the 17th Precinct. The digital forensics team uncovered years of corruption, racially charged emails, texts joking about excessive force, and a systematic pattern of targeting minority residents for bogus stops to meet quotas. It was a cesspool, and Captain Henderson was right at the center of it, directing and covering it up. Miller and Davis weren't just rogue cops. They were products of a deeply rotten system. Their financials told an even darker story. Miller had unexplained cash deposits that lined up perfectly with drug seizures where a portion of the evidence mysteriously went missing. Davis, though newer, was clearly being groomed, with a few small payments from a local bail bondsman for illegal kickbacks. Henderson's corruption was on another level entirely. Extortion, protection rackets, and a slush fund built on civil forfeiture from trumped-up charges against innocent people. They weren't just bullies, they were criminals with badges. The story broke in the national news a week later. The headlines were explosive. FBI director's daughter assaulted by police uncovers massive corruption ring. My face was everywhere, though my family and the Bureau did their best to shield me from the worst of it. The narrative was clear. 2 dirty cops had picked the wrong victim. They hadn't just assaulted a black woman. They had assaulted the daughter of the most powerful lawman in the country, and in doing so had signed their own death warrants. Miller, Davis, and Captain Henderson were fired immediately. That was just the beginning. They, along with 8 other officers from the 17th Precinct, were hit with a sweeping federal indictment. Assault, perjury, falsifying a police report, and a host of RICO charges that carried mandatory minimum sentences. Their smugness was long gone, replaced by the hollow-eyed terror of men whose entire world had been dismantled. Their police union, after seeing the mountain of evidence, dropped them like a hot stone. They were utterly alone. I attended the first day of their arraignment, sitting in the front row with my mother and brother, when Miller was led into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed behind his back. He looked like a ghost. His eyes scanned the gallery and landed on me. The hatred I'd seen that night was gone, replaced by a pathetic, pleading desperation. He saw me, and he knew his life was over. I didn't feel triumph or satisfaction. I just felt a profound, weary sadness for a system that allowed a man like him to wield a gun and a badge for so long. They all pleaded guilty. Facing the full might of the U.S. government, they knew a trial was hopeless. Miller received 15 years in federal prison. Davis, for his cooperation, got 7. Captain Henderson, the ringleader, was sentenced to 25 years without parole. The 17th Precinct was effectively disbanded, its command structure gutted, and rebuilt from the ground up under federal supervision. A few months later, a settlement was reached. The city, desperate to avoid a public trial that would air even more of its dirty laundry, offered a sum that was, by all accounts, historic. My father sat me down in his study to discuss it. "The money is irrelevant, Maya," he said, his voice softer than it had been in weeks. "What matters is the message. They can't be allowed to think they can just buy their way out of this. So, we used the money to send that message. We established a foundation in my name dedicated to police reform and legal aid for victims of police brutality. We funded independent civilian oversight boards, equipped community centers with legal resources, and created scholarships for students from marginalized communities to go to law school. Students who, like me, wanted to fix the system from the inside. My assault was a scar, a trauma I would carry with me forever. But it had also become a catalyst. The experience didn't break my spirit. It forged it in steel. I finished my law degree at the top of my class, no longer just a student learning the law, but a woman who understood its power and its fallibility on a deeply personal level. On graduation day, as I walked across the stage, I saw my father in the audience. He wasn't the director of the FBI in that moment. He was just my dad, his eyes filled with a fierce, unwavering pride. He knew, as I did, that this was not an ending. It was a beginning. My story, which began in the dark on a lonely sidewalk, would now be used to bring the actions of men like Miller and Davis into the light, ensuring that what happened to me would happen to as few others as possible. And that was a victory more satisfying than any prison sentence could ever be.